Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for making time to join us. Looks like we're still gathering, and all will be welcome as they're able to join. Um, we do welcome you to another edition of Safety Included, the workplace health and safety webinar series presented by Encompass Michigan. We are a statewide network of comprehensive human service providers working together to develop independence and achieve inclusive communities. Our topic today is safety committee development. My name is Todd Culver, and I'm the president and CEO of Encompass Michigan. Our presenters today are Rebekah Mosci with the SET division of MIOSHA and Kinde, our education coordinator here at Encompass Michigan, and both will introduce themselves in a moment. This material was prepared under a Consultation Education and Training, or SET grant, awarded by the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or MIOSHA. MIOSHA is a part of the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Encompass Michigan has a long-standing partnership with MIOSHA, and which we highly value, and we appreciate their support. And I'm going to ask our presenters to introduce themselves. Rebekah, you want to go first?
Hello, my name is Rebekah Mosci. I'm an occupational safety advisor with the state of Michigan. And what that means is I can come out to your place with no penalty and assess what sort of hazards are there and what you can do about fixing them. I cover Clinton, Ionia, Ingham, Jackson, and Shiawassee counties. And if I am not one of your counties, we have consultants all over the state that can help you out. Before coming to MIOSHA, I worked as a laboratory safety and regulatory inspector for a university, navigating not just safety and health, but also environmental aspects. And before that, I managed a research lab.
Thanks, Rebekah. Katie, you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I am Kinde. I am a 35-year-old autistic self-advocate. I love learning and I help others learn too. I graduated with a master's in education with a focus in learning design and technology in 2021 from Wayne State University. Now I am the education coordinator as the one who creates trainings, coordinates events, and I handle certificate distribution as well. So if you were one of the people that went to the Encompass Michigan Leadership Conference, you probably got a certificate from me if you signed up for CEUs. I've completed multiple leadership programs, especially through 2023 and 2024, and I've presented multiple times about autism in the workplace. I became a co-leader for the Michigan Advocates to End Seclusion and Restraint in 2024. But then, as of last year, I have been on the board of this. Now it is a 503c nonprofit. Also, in my spare time, I like to walk my dog, draw, and I also love to garden.
Thanks, Katie. So a note about the content before we proceed with our presenters. Inclusivity is very important to us here at Encompass Michigan, and this presentation is made with all needs in mind. We try to avoid using too many colors or pictures, and when we do have images on the screen, we'll try to describe them for users with low vision. And know that handouts are available. A link will be posted in the chat by Katie on a shared drive with some of the resources that we hope you'll find helpful about our content today.
Oop.
Safety Included is the name of our project that's funded through the MIOSHA grant, and it follows federal OSHA's recommended practices for safety and health programs. Those recommended practices offer a step-by-step approach to an overall implementation of a safety and health program and recognize that finding and fixing hazards before they cause injury or illness is a far more effective approach than a reactive. And that's what this presentation is all about, providing a framework for effective safety programs that promote prevention, in today's case through the lens of safety committee development. And it's our contention that a safe workplace is sound business that for everybody, and that's regardless of neurotype. So as the content is presented, we'll try to utilize and also talk about the benefits of things like clear structured visuals and graphics to support comprehension, minimizing sensory distractions, and that applies to both virtual and in-person settings. Some options that can be deployed for both verbal and nonverbal participation from attendees, as well as interactive components that promote engagement without overwhelming, up to and including using time buffered schedules to allow for processing and reflection based on the needs of the participant. Our training objectives today relative to safety committee development will define what a committee is, what the respective roles are within a safety committee, and then talk about how meetings can be developed, agendas formed, and best practices for assuring optimal engagement and effectiveness. In addition to that, we'll also be talking about considerations for you as employers to build trust, to give consideration to how a meeting can be structured as you train and as you meet as a committee. Some additional considerations for neurodiverse participants, including what sensory overload means and how to accommodate certain sensitivities, structuring things for both verbal and nonverbal participants, offering clear signs, the concept of proprioception, as well as I mentioned, the use of time buffered schedules and how things like memory capacity impact retention from learners, and also discuss a variety of different training locations. And again, you will be provided with access to some resources that have been developed through the Safety Included project that we hope you find beneficial. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebekah to start the Safety Committee Development presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk about this subject. Safety committees, especially if you don't have one, can be a really daunting thing to set up from nothing in your workplace. So to start with, what is a safety committee, right? What do we mean when we say that? They plan safety initiatives. This includes determining what the needs are at your facility, as well as assessing the feasibility within your facility and looking for other opportunities, things that you may need to adjust, resourcing, people, money, time, equipment, as well as implementing and sustaining whatever changes for safety that you've put in place. This includes, of course, creating that initial plan as well as monitoring its progress. They guide it from start to finish. That includes adjusting that plan if it doesn't seem to be working, or if funding sources have changed or other resources, what you're procuring, especially with the supply chain today, you never know. So making all of those adjustments as you go through, determining whether or not those things that you put in place are effective. And that includes sharing this progress both with upper management and those frontline workers that a lot of these safety initiatives impact the heaviest. To start, let's discuss some pertinent roles that you'll find on your safety committee. The first being your chairperson. This person has an authoritative role. They're going to run the meetings. They're going to hold people accountable, see the greater vision of what both the firm's plan is, but also where you need to go with safety and what's coming as it applies to safety. Are there new standards coming out? Is your company following one of the consensus standards? Is a new consensus standard coming out? They also understand the company and the committee's interests. On top of that, you have a scheduler. This is a critical role. They need to be able to access employees' calendars, be able to put things on people's calendar, be able to schedule new hire and refresher training, track meeting attendance, understand both long-term goals of the company for scheduling wise. So if you have scheduled maintenance, planning a bunch of training, either during that when people have more free time, or if you have a heavy time of the year, not planning training around that. You also need a communicator. This person puts out what the initiatives are, promoting them, designing and publishing communications. They need to have strong design skills, as well as comfort with charting programs and layouts for infographics. Not every company uses the same things. Working with this person, ensuring they're comfortable with what programs they have in place or have something equivalent that they can utilize on their own is an important part of ensuring that they're capable of doing this job. And then, of course, there are stakeholders. You have your safety and health employees. They have a strong understanding of the regulatory and safety requirements. Those familiar with the process, like frontline workers, they understand how it says on paper versus how it's actually being done in person. They understand why there are those deviations, whether or not it's supported by supervision or something that they've just implemented themselves to make things easier. These people are absolutely critical to have a voice in this, because any change you make without your frontline workers, you run the risk of it not actually being effective. So getting into more detail about who should be on the safety committee, of course, that chairperson, but somebody with authorizing authority, somebody who can get money for projects, take time away, implement any sort of safety initiatives. If you have somebody with no authority making these decisions, they're just talking. Volunteers, of course, this group, it's incredibly important to have volunteers, because if you tell people to join something, are they the most interested group that you could have joining your committee? Do they even care about safety? Do they understand it? Do they want to understand it? So definitely make sure you have volunteers on there. You also want to rotate. You know, you can choose annual rotations, whatever makes the most sense for your group, but that rotation helps bring in fresh perspectives, because if you have the same group making decisions year after year, kind of get stuck in a rut and keep doing the same things over and over. You also want to include different departments. They have an understanding of how things are viewed within their department and how any sort of changes you want to make may impact the broader view of the company, but also they have a different view of how things are done in their area. And they might look at something and say, I don't understand why that's okay. And if it's always been done that way, sometimes we ignore things because it's always been that way, right? So bringing in those other departments, plus you don't know what sort of background somebody's bringing to the table. Just because this is their role here doesn't mean they don't bring a wealth of information from outside of work. And then, of course, just as I stated in the previous slide, those most impacted by the changes should be involved. These are your frontline workers. If you're going to make a change, if you're going to make somebody wear a glove, if you're going to completely redesign a space for safety, or you're going to implement some sort of ergonomic thing, the person using it absolutely needs to be involved in this. So what does your safety committee need? They need support from upper management, and this includes commitment of time, allowing people away from work. And that includes frontline supervisors pulling back, maybe somebody who's critical on the line. So how are you accommodating for that time away? They need money. That's resources for safety equipment, potentially paying consultants, bringing in someone that has a better understanding of something to train or help people better understand the process. And then resources. For those that you're pulling away to be part of this committee, could their requirements be reduced so that they have time to do both their actual job plus their commitment to this committee well, right? Space for the meeting, providing just space to meet. It's incredibly important. And then potentially people for larger initiatives. So if you're trying to completely reorganize a space for better flow and functionality, that includes a heavy safety component. That's not just the safety committee. They're gonna need more people to help figure out what works best for everyone and also come up with different layout options. So meeting best practices. First off, you need to have a plan. You want to have a plan for what the goal of the current meeting is, as well as understanding where you're going from a long-term perspective, and a layout of how the outcomes of the current meeting today will impact following meetings. In addition, you need an agenda. It gives a timeline and topics for the meeting, and it also allows those attending to plan their contributions to the meeting beforehand. So make sure you get those out with enough time for people to actually look at them. I know with all of us being so busy, sometimes that gets missed. You want to limit those attending. With all I said earlier, bringing in all these stakeholders, right? Sometimes something can really balloon to something much larger. You want to limit that because while it's important to have a diverse group for fresh and creative ideas, hence the importance of rotating those, you will need a consensus. So if you have a lot of people, it's hard to get that consensus. So limiting the size to what you can get an agreement on for any initiatives you're trying to put in place. As they say, too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Roles also need to be clearly defined so that people understand what they're supposed to be doing as part of the committee. Expectations for each role will help with successful program implementation and give members a clear understanding of their expected contribution. This includes things like ensuring the chairperson knows that they are guiding and keeping everyone on task. Is the scheduler comfortable with the calendar technology being utilized? Is the communicator adept at working with the programs available? Are they comfortable creating graphs and infographics? Are stakeholders aware of how much they are expected to contribute? Obviously, with any sort of safety committee, we want people talking and contributing and giving suggestions. So do they know what their role is there? You also want to document the outcomes of the meeting. After their meeting concludes, anything requiring action should be documented. Action items need due dates. Schedulers could add them to the scheduler, add them to the calendar, or reminder emails could go out from either the communicator or the chairperson. You choose your roles and your responsibilities. And then notes on the meeting should be retained. This will help in the future, especially when trying to remember why something wasn't done or why something was done a specific way, because it's nothing like somebody asking you 4 years later what was going on here. And you're like, the time to ask me was at least that year, right? Responsibility should also be assigned for any action items. Once a plan has been made, people need to be assigned responsibility for their roles within it. If you're looking, for example, if you're looking at injury intervention, who will go out and observe where injuries occurred and what tasks were being performed? If PPE needs to purchase, who's going to look into what's available? Is it going to be trialed? Who's in charge of that? What's the deadline for that? Does a meeting need to be scheduled with upper management for a major project? Who's going to be present at the meeting? Who's initiating that meeting request? And finally, for this slide, it needs to be regularly scheduled. The importance of this, it adds predictability so that participants can plan their other responsibilities around it. If it isn't regularly scheduled, they may become less and less often until basically your committee doesn't really exist anymore. Meeting schedule is unique to the needs of your organization. It can be daily for some dynamic environments like construction, that's your toolbox talk, but also could be, hey, this is what project we're going out on today. Here's what needs to be said during that toolbox talk. It can be biweekly or weekly for if necessary, for high hazard environments. Some of the high hazard environments that MIOSHA addresses on their strategic plan, just so that you know whether or not you're included in this, would be food manufacturing, wood product manufacturing, plastics and rubber products manufacturing, non-metallic mineral product manufacturing, primary metal manufacturing, fabricated metal product manufacturing, machinery manufacturing, transportation equipment manufacturing, hospitals, and nursing and residential care facilities, along with construction. They should not be less frequent than monthly. It's hard to guide change if you're rarely meeting. So I lightly touched on agenda. So why have an agenda? An agenda outlines the plan for your meeting. It gives time limits, and it keeps everyone on task. You can see on this slide, I've provided an example agenda. You definitely want to leave time to welcome people, get everybody comfortable talking, greeting each other. That only needs about 5 minutes. But then from there, you want to give yourself another 5 minutes to address what you plan to deal with in the meeting. So in this example, they're addressing the safety site needs at the facility. And then the bulk of your time is dealing with what you're actually there for. So in this example, they're reviewing 300 logs and good catches. So identify areas for safety interventions should be a significant portion of time, reviewing both those data sets, prioritizing interventions, planning just 1 or 2 interventions. And the importance of this just 1 or 2 interventions is so that you don't overwhelm everyone with a bunch of interventions. You want to be focused on something simple so that A, it's achievable and people aren't confused about what they're supposed to be doing. So keeping it simple, down to 1 or 2 interventions at a time, waiting till they're corrected, then moving on to the next, is a really good system. And then assigning that responsibility, as I spoke about in the previous slide. So finally, I put in this slide to help inspire people with some safety intervention targets. So the first thing you can do is review your 300 logs. Look to see if there are any injury patterns, something that if you address, it addresses more than just a singular issue. So let's say you have 7 lacerations and 2 ergonomic injuries. So both of those, 7's a lot. And then of course, ergonomic injuries are expensive. Lacerations may be caused by the process, lack of PPE, or incorrect or poorly fitting PPE. So coming out of this meeting, what you should discuss, who's going to observe this? Are you doing observations? Are you interviewing those injured? When you're observing, does the process put them in close proximity to sharp sheet metal or something else that could cause a laceration? How are they handling knives? Should it be like a food service thing? Are they coming in close proximity to anything that could cut them? Does the PPE fit everyone and fit them so that they can function in it? Are they removing it and why? Are they removing it for a safety reason, such as gloves around rotating machinery? Could you amend the process to reduce the need for PPE coming on and off so that they can work safely both with the sharp object and then with the rotating machinery? There are actually gloves out there where the fingers break off. That's what they're designed to do so people can't get caught up in it. Ergonomic injuries, those are incredibly costly. They take a ton of time away from work. So not only do you lose that person, you now have to find somebody to possibly cover them during that, or just limp by on fewer people, right? That makes it very difficult. So and on top of that, certainly with back injuries, among other things, sometimes they never fully recover, and you have somebody that's at risk of greater injury as we move forward. The things that you can do to look into ergonomic injuries, there's Small companies actually can reach out to U of M. They have a grant through us, just like Encompass Michigan has this grant where they can come out and do some site assessments and help people look for ergonomic risk factors. But there's also apps that can help with assessments, and then, of course, consultants available. Next, looking at near misses and good catches. If you have a great safety culture and people are already reporting things, looking over those and seeing, have reports of spills increased? Do you have stuff where people are complaining about an influx of material that's blocking walkways or exits? Maybe it's a heavy time for stuff coming for production. So you have a lot of stuff coming in stage ready to go and get put into the process. Is it winter? Should people be going out and looking around for slip, trip, and fall hazards, especially due to ice and accumulated water over ice? And most relevant today, as I'm sure you guys are all feeling it, how hot is it outside? Are your workers exposed to this heat? Are your workers exposed to excessive heat? Because even if they're indoor and it's somewhat climate controlled, is that heat increasing? Are they acclimated to it? What plan do you have in place to deal with that? And when you're doing your safety committees, if you're not quite sure what to talk about, you can look at what's currently going on. Are we approaching summer months? Should you address heat? Are we approaching winter? Should you address cold and slip, ice, slip, trip, and fall hazards? These can be completely customized. And if you're ever at a loss, you can always reach out to any one of the safety consultants at MIOSHA. We're thinking about it all the time. Also, when you're doing this, as I said earlier, limiting it to 1 or 2 items. So you're going to want to prioritize things. Looking at severity, high severity items should be addressed immediately, especially if there is exposure. The frequency of exposure is important. A lower severity item that employees are exposed to regularly is a higher priority than a higher severity item that people are only exposed to once a year. If they're only exposed to once a year, you can correct it before that singular exposure. And then finally, quick fixes. If you can fix it quickly, just fix it. Doesn't matter if it's low severity, just fix it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Rebekah. Folks can place questions in the chat if you have them. In the meantime, we're going to turn the floor over to Katie to talk a little bit about some accommodations and delivery and training delivery.
Thanks so much, Todd. So this section of the presentation is how to make meetings and trainings more effective. So each person, regardless of neurotype, has a preferred learning method, and we're just trying to help employers and employees improve meetings and trainings for better outcomes overall. So, things you might want to consider, employees of different neurotypes may have different needs. So talking to employees directly about their preferences is the best way to ensure needs are met. If you're not familiar with what a neurotype is, it's just different ways brains are made or how they think. So each person, regardless of what their disability or what their diagnosis is, each person is unique. So it's best to always gain trust of your employees by asking for consent, especially if it's a neurodivergent employee, on ways to improve meetings, trainings, etc. Also, creating that trusting relationship is really important because in times of stress like injury, you want your employees to come to you without fear. Neurodiverse employees can have anxiety, so be patient. Also, if you want to try to, change the way you deliver things verbally, just try to make sure that you're speaking concisely and in a neutral tone. Some employees may need additional support and freedom to ask questions to better understand what they're learning or what they're talking about. It's important to forge this trust early on. So always treat questions with respect so that employees do not fear being ridiculed in the future. So while running a safety committee, for example, how do you keep employees of all neurotypes on task while being respectful to their questions? Um, as Rebekah mentioned earlier, making an agenda is a great way to keep everyone on track. So if anyone gets off topic, a gentle reminder can remind everybody of the topic at hand. And also acknowledge any question that's being asked, even if it's a little off topic, but offer solutions for after the meeting. So, an example of a conversation may go like this. One of the committee members may ask, who's taking notes today? And maybe the person running the committee meeting will say, Sandy is taking the notes. That same employee will ask, how are they backed up? I'm worried that we might lose them if they're not getting backed up. So, the committee leader could say something like, that's a legitimate question, but let's talk about that more after the meeting. We have an agenda to stick to. So that's just a nice respectful way to just acknowledge the question without seeming like it wasn't relevant or seeming like it was bad to ask the question. Questions help people learn. So, also, we wanted to point this out. Some neurotypes have what is termed as black and white thinking, and they cannot see the gray in between. And this is their way their brain sees situations, usually with only one of two solutions. It also leads to rigidity or believing that there is only one right way to do things. And that's why it's so important to be concise with your directions, and actually say the reasons why the directions are the way they are, because it will help people understand why they're doing what they're doing. As Rebekah was saying earlier, definitely try to give your employees tasks that they excel in, especially if they're on a safety committee. So ask yourselves, what roles do your employees excel in? Um, for example, people who are handy with a computer and love Excel, they should be making the spreadsheets. Those who like to write, let them take notes. And those with attention to detail should do walkthroughs of the site. Tasks can be hard to manage, though ensure that everyone's responsibilities are clearly stated. Shared document with team members listed for each can make it easier for everyone. Some organizations actually have um, programs that they pay for to manage this type of stuff. However, if your organization doesn't have that, an Excel sheet, a Google spreadsheet, or Microsoft lists can be good for this. And asking committee members if they need assistance with their task is also a great way to forge that trust and make sure that people feel like they can ask for questions if they have any. So, or ask questions if they have any. Um, when it comes to organizational methods for the tasks at hand, some people may have preferences on how these tasks are organized or how information even is organized in an Excel spreadsheet. So talk to your committee about how they would like things arranged. Is the font big enough for them to read during meetings? Do they need more colors or less colors in the little cells that hold information? Would they prefer a dark mode instead of a bright mode where, the text is white and the rest of the screen is black? Um, Also offer prints of information when you can so that people can have a physical copy. Reminders are also very important. Depending on the communication preferences of your team, you may want to send a reminder in multiple formats, email, text, to meet everyone's needs, and include links to the Zoom meeting or agenda. Some people, especially in the committees I've been in, through not through work, we usually use multiple formats because some people may not even look at their emails throughout the day. They may only use text. So just be mindful that there are multiple ways to meet people's needs. Also a great idea, having a follow-up email with a summary of the meeting is a great way for all members to reflect and easier recall what was discussed. and that way you can stay more on topic during the next meeting. Also, this is a big thing as well, a big thing you want to be mindful of. All neurotypes process things at different rates. So when there's a brainstorming session, provide a shared document for everyone to add their thoughts, whether that be a Word document or a Google Sheet is a Google document, something where people can type out their thoughts, and give them ample time to think about it in advance and even after the meeting. So anytime you're looking for people's feedback, just make sure you're giving them the opportunity to give feedback, and even in multiple formats would be good as well. For psychological ergonomics, consider getting fidget toys that work for your employees. Always allow employees to use fidget toys to relieve stress when possible, if they need it, especially. There are many types, and it can help the productivity of all employees, especially during a meeting. So avoid sticky or messy fidgets like slime or fidgets filled with liquid or sand that can break. Some are fragile and can break after a session. So also loud fidgets can be somewhat distracting to others. I am in no way endorsed, but these are some of the fidgets that actually I use personally. Everyone has a different preference, but these ones are a singular ball bearing gear, and when they spin, they're very quiet. So they work really well during meetings, in my opinion, but each person may have a different need or request. Sometimes people don't like the feel of metal. They'd rather prefer the feel of like a plastic gear or things like that. So it may be a trial and an error process before you find the right ones for your employees. Also, considering trainings, because these are safety committees, you may be looking over ways to improve the workplace. So you can, for the following information, you can use it to not only improve your committees, but also improve the safety trainings and culture in the workplace. If there are neurodiverse employees on your committee, let them share their ideas because they can give insightful information on helpful changes that can be made for all neurotypes. And if you are an employee on a committee, hopefully some of this information will help you make changes in your workplace. So, an important topic I like to talk about during these events is sensory overload. It is a state where the brain receives too much sensory input to process, and it leads to symptoms like anxiety, irritability, confusion, and physical discomfort. It can be triggered by common stimuli such as noises, bright lights, strong smells, and crowded spaces, but also by emotional stress, physical fatigue, or environmental changes. And that's important to note too, because I think a lot of people who know about sensory overload kind of think about the environmental uh, aspects, but also it can be affected by stress and fatigue. So always keep in mind of that as well. During sensory overload, information is less likely to be retained, and this leads to an unsuccessful meeting or training. So, recognizing triggers and using strategies like reducing exposure to stimuli, using sensory aids, or finding quiet spaces can help management. Um, Always talk to your employees about the best way to help them reduce exposure or help manage their stress, um, because employees themselves know what they need most. So consider ways to ensure neurodiverse people are comfortable when training or meeting to ensure information is more easily retained. Uh, Especially when it comes to employees with autism, sensitivities are things that can be looked at and changed so that people are more comfortable. Um, People with autism can be extra sensitive to loud noises or bright lights. Um, So overall, it's just best to consider their needs and converse and ask if, like I was saying earlier, if any changes to the environment could help their learning experience and prevent sensory overload. While some of these can help during a training, it may not be appropriate while equipment is operating. That's just a note in case you work in a environment that has like machines and things like that. Because the accommodations that we're mentioning are things like white noise machines, access to white noise music, tinted glasses, and headphones. Again, those are some things that would probably be more effective in like an office setting. Auditory and visual considerations. Ensure that your trainings are accessible. Neurodiverse people are prone to comorbidities. So visually, you should have large text and describe images or steps for anyone with low vision. When speaking, ensure that you are using a microphone if any employees have low hearing. Also another sense to consider, consider the sensitivity to smell or sense. For those who are sensitive, it may be overwhelming. So there's a lot of personal management an employee can do. They can mask it by using different materials like Vicks Vapor Rub, lavender, peppermint oil, or even toothpaste or chapstick. By rubbing it underneath the nose or inside their mask, they can essentially overpower the other smells that can be affecting them. There are also breathing techniques that can be achieved by breathing through the mouth or taking shallow breaths. Even humming can sometimes block some smells. Scented items like minty gum, strong mints, or Listerine strips can also be very helpful. For environmental management, just make sure that you are cleaning up any sources of scents, like making sure everything is clean and using enzymatic cleaners and making sure all surfaces are clean. Um, Also, make sure that your ventilation is working properly. Ensure there's proper air circulation, that there's fans, or that employees are able to open windows when possible. Also consider tactile sensitivities. So some neurotypes may have a lot of discomfort from certain materials. But also it could be something where they even have allergies. So hypoallergenic options should always be considered for all of your employees. Um, Proprioception, this is an important topic too. Certain neurotypes have a different level of proprioception, which is awareness of one's body. Sometimes they do not perceive themselves well, especially if they are hyper focused. Especially people with autism may work themselves too hard physically without even realizing until after a task is done. A way that you can help out with this, especially if your employees like voice that they need some verbal assistance, be proactive with reminders of self. So, for example, Todd, in particular, he reminds me a lot when I'm in the office, especially when there's a conference going on or something, and I am just like in work mode. I don't think about my own self very well, and I just think about the task at hand. And I don't have a very good back, and sometimes I will pick up boxes and move things around without even thinking about it. And Todd will just give me a little heads up, like, hey, you might want to, think about your back, make sure that uh, you're not overdoing it. And I really appreciate those just because, not only is he being thoughtful about, me taking care of myself, but also, it helps me in the long run. Also, consider the proximity of people to other people. So people who are neurodivergent may have a lot of issues when it comes to proximity to other people. So always think about how their comfort or their consent matters. It should be discussed for everyday interactions beyond trainings. So even something as simple as placing a hand on an employee's shoulder may be extremely uncomfortable, especially to a neurodivergent employees. So always ask for consent. This is something I like to practice myself a lot, especially when greeting people. Even if I've met them a million times before and I know they like hugs, I always ask like, "Hey, do you like hugs?" Even if the answer has always been yes, I always make sure to voice that because you never know people's situation and you never know um what their consent is. And it may just seem like something really small, but especially to neurodivergent people, it can be a really big thing. So, this is a little example, like maybe during an interactive in-person training on how to go through a procedure, a trainer may absent-mindedly want to show an employee up close and just kind of like maybe trying to show them how to work on a little tool or something and maybe get up right in the employee's face. And before doing that, though, a trainer should ask if it's all right to be up close before showing each step. A way to avoid this as well is letting the employees learn by going through the steps themselves. Communication is really important, but always consider what your employees need if it's a verbal or nonverbal communication. Um, Nonverbal, and it isn't about not talking, it's about using diverse communication methods. You could use gestures and visuals, but mainly the overall point is that it's beyond speech. It's for people who face sensory challenges, but also process language differently. Um, think about how people may even process language in a way that's literally literal and not nuanced, or take everything by the word and not by the intent. So just keeping in mind, sometimes even sarcasm can go over people's heads. So that's why you definitely want to communicate with people in a concise and straight to the point way. Sometimes certain neurotypes may need to go nonverbal, or in other words, the employee shuts down, and that can be due to overwhelm. This requires patience and clear, direct communication, respecting their cues and understanding their unique sensory processing needs to bridge gaps. Um, Going nonverbal isn't ideal, so communication before this like shutdown is essential for preparing for these moments. Employees themselves know what they need most, so having that communication is essential. Though not required, some employees may even prefer having signs on their name badge that show their current availability verbally. So, for example, some companies have used like things on their lapel labels, or on their little name badges. Also, if they have a little oh, I can't think of the word for it. My apologies, everybody. Um, Anything that is a badge of sorts, they'll have like little magnets that can attach to them that show a different color for how available they are. So green is like, yes, come speak to me, and red is like, no. Um, some places may, especially in an office setting, may do better by having sticky notes on people's monitors that, show like different color coding or different sayings that is like available, not available. If people have their own offices, a sign on the door may work really well too. And this can also be helpful when employees wear headphones as well. So, even if an employee is wearing a headphone, they may still have a little marker or indicator that, hey, you can talk to me, or it might be red, meaning like, no, I can't talk right now. Also make sure when you're making training materials that they are also clear. So speaking in a concise and clear manner may not be enough, especially if you're making training materials. You want to make sure those are also clear. So here's an example to follow this. So this is just a general notice that shows that with a little caution sign a little caution symbol with the triangle and a little exclamation point in the middle. And it says notice right next to that. Below it, it says safety helmet required in this area. And on the lower left side, there is a very simplified person wearing a industrial helmet. At the bottom of the little blue sign, there is in smaller font, for more information, contact the safety department, and a fake number there. So this shows the most important information and the largest text, but it's all on one page. One thing that I said before, like while describing this image, but I just wanted to point out again, having contact information for somebody to be able to contact somebody else in your department is essential, especially when people have questions. Even if it's just a little notice that you may think people might not have questions about it and it's very straightforward. Always making sure that people have a way to ask questions is really important. So now we're looking at different design methods. You can apply this to trainings, to meetings, but it's kind of like a mindset of design. Universal design allows educators and learners to set clear goals, anticipate environmental barriers, create meaningful options, and fully embrace human variability. In other words, it's about having multiple methods of learning. Especially when it comes to safety, this ensures that everyone has the resources they need to learn processes regardless of neurotype, because everyone learns differently. So consider making step-by-step documents, signs, videos, and plan on showing processes in person. This way, everyone can have multiple options to learn the same information. Also, time buffered schedules are really important, especially when you're training for an all-day, fully packed training that has a lot of information for it. You really need to ensure that you allow for processing and reflection, and this affects all neurotypes. So consider having breaks during long trainings or breaks in video trainings. A 15-minute break for every 1 to 2 hours in person or live is really important. Also, be sure to break up long sessions with activities and discussions so that it's not just somebody talking to a room full of people. Make sure that there's other activities going on in between those lectures or presentations. So people have different ways to sort of process that information. So even after all you can do to make a training, consider everyone's memory capacity. On average, it is estimated 50% of what is learned is immediately forgotten, and spaced learning helps retain what is taught. So your trainings may already reoccur throughout the year, maybe every 6 months, maybe once a year. But this graph that I'll explain in a second is essentially showing that the more you give employees the opportunity to actively retrieve something, the more that they actually retain that information and it sticks in their brain. So across the x-axis is time, across the y-axis going up and down is retention, and um, there's a red curve going down that's called the forgetting curve from day 0 when someone learns something. But then there's points in this graph where an employee is given more options to actively retrieve or actively review that information. And as time goes on, the more instances where they had that active retrieval, the forgetting curve flattens out and it causes better long-term retention. Also, always consider training location. There's evidence showing that information retention for all neurotypes is also affected by location. Employees are more likely to remember information in the spot they learned that information. So this means that procedures should be taught in the spot they will be used. We created a checklist for you to discuss with your employees and apply to your trainings. I feel like it is getting pretty close to 2 o'clock, so I think maybe it might be good to skip this part for now. Is that okay, Todd? And then just
It
open
is,
up the
Katie.
room for questions. Okay.
Yep.
So, did you want to go over the summary then?
Sure, and thanks for all the helpful information. And do know that some of the resources that are available to you have already been provided through a link in the chat.
Mhm.
And just in summary of our conversation today and the great content presented by both Rebekah and Katie, when you're thinking about creating or making changes to promote greater effectiveness to an existing safety committee, um, think about planning, resources, what it's going to take to implement. And there are helpful, we hope, resources that can guide you from start to finish, including the roles that folks need to play as chair, as schedule, someone who can provide communications, and the importance of including the appropriate stakeholders. That there needs to be decision-making authority within the committee structure, but also helpful volunteers and not voluntolds. And rotating folks through committee roles can also be very helpful. Those role assignments within the safety committee need to make sense to the people who are fulfilling them, but also with an eye towards again, the ultimate effectiveness of the committee's output on the safe and healthy behaviors within the organization. And then to follow some of those best meeting practices, having a plan, creating an agenda, not making the group too large so that it remains effective in review and decision making, and making sure everyone understands their role and that everything gets documented, as well as the importance of maintaining a regular schedule. Also, it's important to remember all the considerations that Katie went through, both for committee development and training delivery, and accommodations that can support an inclusive and diverse workforce. And whether it's creating a safety committee or training, remember to consider the needs of all your employees in ways that help improve retention, which will ultimately keep employees safer in their working environment. So we're bumping up against the top of the hour here. If folks do have questions, please enter them in the chat. But thank you for joining us today. Do be careful and stay healthy out there. We do have a list of some resources that were utilized for Katie's portion of the program, and she's got a wealth of knowledge in this space, so feel free to reach out afterwards. And Katie and I are also available to support additional training. If you're interested in that option, do please reach out to Katie. Her email address is on the screen now. And with that, we thank again Rebekah and Katie for great presentations today, and thank you all for carving out time that we know is precious to join us today. And we hope you'll join for a future session of the Safety Included webinar series. But again, thanks for joining us.